Hello, my name is Kevin Annett, Eagle Strong Voice, and I welcome the opportunity today to appear before the West Coast Common Law Court of Justice, today, Wednesday, September 20th, 2023. I thank the honorable judges and the gathered prosecutor and jurors for having me here today and sharing my testimony. The testimony involves three of my friends and colleagues who were murdered at the hands of the Vancouver police, the RCMP, and various churches. And I will be giving testimony today within the sovereign jurisdiction of the Republic of Canada, outside Crown jurisdiction, here on the territory of the Squamish and Musqueam indigenous people, known as Vancouver. My first testimony has to do with Harriett Nahanee, who I knew personally for many years and worked with in the campaign to expose genocide in the United Church, the Catholic Church, and the Anglican Church death camps called residential schools. Harriett Nahanee was the first eyewitness to a murder at a Canadian Indian residential school to go public and be quoted in the media in the Vancouver Sun on December 18th, 1995. We met at a protest rally we held to protest my firing by the United Church without cause for exposing these crimes. And Harriett's account in the Vancouver Sun on that day of her witnessing of the killing of Maisie Shaw, a little girl in the Alberni residential school, by the principal of that facility, Alfred Caldwell. The murder that took place on Christmas Eve 1946, her sharing of that story in the newspaper that day sparked the formation of our Vancouver-based campaign to document and confront these crimes. Along with me, Harriett Nahanee organized the first public meeting in the Indian residential schools on February 9th, 1998, and the first international tribunal into these crimes on June 12th to 14th, 1998 in Vancouver, sponsored by the United Nations affiliate IRAM. Beginning in the spring of 2000, Harriett and I commenced public protests at the Catholic, Anglican, and United Churches in Vancouver, and we launched the national movement for justice and reparations for residential school survivors. This campaign was organized under the auspices of the Independent Truth Commission into Genocide in Canada, which we formed, and then later its offshoot, the Friends and Relatives of the Disappeared. Along with me, Harriett Nahanee began to be overtly harassed and assaulted soon after our successful June 1998 tribunal and the global media and political attention it garnered. Throughout 1998 and 1999, both Harriett and I were confronted and threatened with arrest and prosecution by RCMP officers Jerry Peters and Paul Wilms of the E Division Detachment in Vancouver. Both Wilms and Peters claimed that they were acting under the authority and orders of RCMP Inspector Peter Montague of E Division. Now, the same Peter Montague, between 1995 and 1997, had worked closely with the United Church officials who had fired me without cause, John Jessamine, Phil Spencer, Brian Thorpe, and others, and also with my ex-wife, Ann McNamee, who, along with the church officials, monitored, fired, harassed, and blacklisted me after I went public with evidence of the killings in their Alberni residential school. In addition, during the same period, Harriett Nahanee was forced from her home on the Squamish Indian Reservation, was denied government benefits, and faced escalating smears and misinformation within her own family and the Aboriginal community, in a move parallel to what happened to me. Well, these overt assaults against me and Harriett were accompanied by the covert infiltration and disruption of our Truth Commission and Friends and Relatives of the Disappeared group and the actions we organized. An RCMP and former FBI informant and operative named James Craven headed this Black Ops campaign after the June 1998 tribunal, which he had infiltrated as a judge. Craven circulated lies and smears against Harriett and myself in the media and in our extended networks. He also paid our Aboriginal colleagues like Amy and Dennis Talio to speak against us. As with me, these payoffs extended to Harriett's friends and family members. Well, despite these attacks, Harriett countered these smears and persisted in her public campaigning alongside me and other survivors. We held our first Friends and Relatives of the Disappeared sponsored Aboriginal Holocaust Memorial Day in Vancouver on April 15th, 2005. And at the same time, we escalated our church protests and occupations. Harriett also helped me produce my seminal award-winning documentary film, Unrepentant, which really forced out the truth and the so-called apology about residential school crimes in in June 2008. With that film, Unrepented, which was released globally just a month after she was killed in February 2007, we really lit the flame on the entire issue. But in the response, there was a counterattack. At the time of her death, Harriett and I were prepared to undertake a national speaking tour, equipped with the film Unrepented, that was to culminate in a protest and global press conference in Ottawa, outside Parliament, on March 15, 2007. And at that press conference, we were to call for an international war crimes tribunal to be convened against Canada, the Vatican, the Crown of England, and the Catholic, Anglican, and United Churches, based on the Iram Tribunal findings, June 1998. But before that press conference and tour could happen, on January 24, 2007, Harriett Nahanee was arrested by RCMP officers at a peaceful protest in North Vancouver. She was held without bail, charged with public mischief, and sentenced by BC Supreme Court Judge Brenda Brown to incarceration in an unheated cell in Surrey Remand Prison. Harriett then quickly developed bronchial congestion and pneumonia, and she died of alleged lung cancer less than a month later, on February 24, 2007, at the age of 71. No death certificate for Harriett Nahanee has ever been released, despite our repeated request to the BC Coroner's Office. Therefore, I name and I present to the court this indictment, that the following individuals are culpable in the criminal conspiracy against and murder of Harriett Nahanee, and we name them as defendants in this case, but they're not restricted to these individuals. They include former RCMP Commissioner William Elliott, Peter Montague, Jerry Peters, and Paul Wilms, officers with RCMP Division in Vancouver, Judge Brenda Brown of the BC Supreme Court, David Giuliano, former moderator of the United Church of Canada, John Jessamine, Phil Spencer, and Brian Thorpe, officials of the United Church, Anne McNamee, James Craven, Amy and Dennis Tellio, and various Jane and John Does, who are part of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the United Church of Canada, and the Surrey Remand Correctional Facility. Now, I should mention that all of the supporting documentation, photos, and other material corroborating my testimony will be included in the appendices attached to the hard copy document of that statement that you will receive from me. This is my testimony about Harriett Nahanee, and I will continue with similar testimonies concerning William Coombs and Johnny Bingo Dawson.